sometimes people come to these workshops and they're like, I'm just not good at art. And sometimes I ask, why do you feel that way? And they'll say, it's because a classmate of theirs in elementary school was like better than them. And you can let go of that. I love empowering people to reflect on what is holding them back and then giving them literally the tools to move forward in a more free thinking, free spirited kind of way.
Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, why a local art teacher left the public school system and how she can help you let go of what's holding you back. Today's story starts in my 7th grade math class. Miss Waterstram was teaching a unit about proportions. Not the kind with fractions, I was really good at those, but the kind that included drawing on graph paper. For one particular assignment, our teacher gave us a list of famous cartoon characters, and from that list, we could choose any one we liked. The assignment, just run some calculations and draw the characters to exact proportion. Bursting with excitement, I started tuning out Miss Waterstram's voice because I couldn't wait to draw my favorite duo, Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. When I sat down to copy the image provided, at the last minute of course, I couldn't believe the magic that my pencil was creating. I'd never been good at art, but for the first time ever, I felt like it was finally happening. I honed in on the details of Scooby's dog collar, the white teeth of his goofy smile jumped off the paper, and the olive color of Shaggy's shirt brought the entire work to life. When I finished, I marveled at my masterpiece, and I couldn't wait to hang it on the fridge. The next day at school, my friends showed me their drawings of Batman and Robin, SpongeBob and Patrick, the Ninja Turtles, and then I proudly presented my piece to them. But instead of showering me with the praise I'd expected, they instead offered a different reaction. They burst out laughing. My friend Scott pointed out that Scooby's head was bigger than the rest of his body, that Shaggy's legs were far too short for his lanky frame. Looking at my friend's pieces in comparison to mine, it was in that moment I realized that I'd misunderstood the assignment. I didn't draw mine to exact proportion. I hadn't run any of the calculations. I just looked at the example given and tried to copy it. With my tail between my legs, I handed in my assignment. Days later, Miss Waterstram gave me my fate. With the red pen reserved only for losers like me, she marked it with a big old F. I wanted to cry. I thought I had crushed the assignment. Instead, it had crushed me. That is, until the next year. For extra credit in 8th grade, my art teacher told me that we could free draw any historic duo of our choice. So what did I do? I handed in the same disproportionate drawing of Scooby and Shaggy that I'd been so proud of a year prior. What was my grade? An A. A big old A. Take that, Scott and Miss Waterstram. Art, as it always has been, is whatever you choose to make it, no matter how perfect or imperfect it is. And someone who is all too familiar with that lesson is today's guest on the show, Amy Tilton. She's a self-proclaimed community art teacher here on the Seacoast. After spending 6 years teaching in public schools, Amy now wears many artistic hats. She teaches to small groups of kids after school, and she hosts workshops at local breweries where adults can paint cool stuff while drinking good beer. In addition, she gives private lessons, sells her paint everywhere kits, and she even commissions some pieces too. Amy lives in Dover now, and as for her Seacoast story, well, I'll let her explain where it begins.
I will say, just for my home gals, my home folks, I did grow up in Stratham, but I did go to Exeter High School. And I think you can tell an Exeter lifer by the way they say Exeter. We say Exeter. Outsiders, even people who grew up in a few towns over, say Exeter. So that's how you know that someone grew up in Exeter.
What was the difference between what you just said? Exeter.
Exeter. And then some people say Exeter.
Oh, okay. So when they say Exeter, that's when you know they're legit.
They grew up here. Yes.
I love that.
Being pedantic is a fun way to start a podcast, right?
Yes. We can tell you're a teacher already. So what was growing up in Exeter like?
So I am a lifer. I actually was born in Massachusetts, but I grew up in Stratham. I've been on the Seacoast since I was really young. And I, like many of us, never really wanted to move away. Or a lot of us do, but people end up drifting back because they realize that their parents actually picked a really great spot to live and work and play. So I feel really lucky to call the Seacoast home and have so many wonderful friends who still live here. And yeah, I think the Seacoast just keeps getting better and better. We live in Dover now, and Dover's come up a lot, always new coffee shops to explore and breweries and new places. So I feel really lucky to live here, even though I've traveled a lot all over the world. So I think that says a lot when you're well-traveled and still want to live where you grew up.
What do you like most about this area?
I would never be able to live far from the ocean. I think that's huge. And then for me, proximity to Logan. I would never move inland because of the ocean and because I'd be far from going other places. So I think it's just a great springboard. We spent a lot of time traveling to Europe. My mom was a flight attendant for 40 years. So if I lived anywhere else in the US, it would be hard to get there. Like a hop across the pond feels like nothing from Boston, but from other places, it would feel like a lot more. So, and then mountains, places to eat, great people. I love New Englanders. So I don't know. We're just at like the crossroads of so many cool places. And then this is also a great place to be. So it's not just about living here, but it's what you're close to that makes it a great place to be.
I'm so glad that you're well traveled because I love talking about traveling. Now, I agree with you. It must say something about the area that if you are well traveled, that you want to keep being here. I'm wondering if the ocean is such a huge appeal to you. You've probably seen the ocean from many different angles and on much better beaches than the Seacoast beaches. So have you ever been on a Seacoast beach? Because I've had this thought, kind of uppity thought where I'm like, I've seen better beaches than here. Why am I here?
Gosh.
Have you ever had that thought?
You know what? I feel a little bit called out on that because I'm not a huge beach person here. I'm really not. My mom grew up in Bermuda. My whole family lives on a tropical island. So I don't actually go to the beach that much. Maybe it's the fact that I know the ocean is there and I can drive past it if I need a little fix or I can do a painting. But yeah, I'm definitely, and especially the water being so cold. I don't mind a cold plunge in the wintertime, but in the summer, it's jarring. Yeah. I don't go to the beach that much, I guess, now that I think about it.
Your mom was a flight attendant for 40 years.
Yeah, for Delta. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
She put in her time.
I dated a flight attendant from Delta. I have my own thoughts. I'll keep that to myself.
Wait, I want to hear.
No. This is about you. This is not about me and my personal struggles. That sounds like a personal
issue rather than like a Delta or like flight attendant lifestyle thing.
Yes. 40 years. So I imagine your childhood was filled with trips of your mom taking you somewhere for 24 hours.
Yes, it really was. I would say it was pretty unconventional. They would pull us out of school fairly regularly. My brother and I, not that we weren't allowed to do sports, but like it was pretty clear that if we did, our lifestyle would have to take a serious shift just because of pulling us out of school for different trips at different times. And because we flew standby, we only got on the plane if there was space. Sometimes we would show up at the airport 3 nights in a row before we got to Spain or wherever we were going. Which at the time and now just feels like an adventure. Like you're with your mom, your dad, your brother, you're going somewhere cool, or you might not, but like no matter what, you'll be fine. I think that experience as a young person really shaped who I am with just being flexible and being up for anything. And then if my mom was working the flight, sometimes she'd pull me out of school she had like a 5-day to London. Sometimes the more senior you were, you'd get these really long, fabulous trips where you work the flight over. They would pay you to just hang out in a cool place for a few days, and then you'd work the flight back. So yeah, so I did that several times with my mom. And the best was when we would get in first class or business class. Yeah.
Wow.
Because if there's space, that's where they're putting us. So really fun childhood for sure.
I am so jealous. Some kids get pulled out of school for a dentist appointment. You get pulled out of school for a 5-day trip to London. That's amazing. But at the time, did you realize how unusual this was, / how cool this was, and how fortunate you were able to have these experiences so young?
I'm happy to say that I really did. Like I appreciated it so much then, and I appreciate it even more now, this time that I got to spend with my family and all of the people that I got to meet and all of the different ways that people lived that I got to witness. I think it's made me probably less judgmental of a person than I would be, because if you get out of the place where you grew up, you can just see that there's so many different ways to be successful and to live a good life. And I think that was probably my college essay, now that I think about it, because it did make such a huge impact on the person that I am. And obviously I have really cool parents too, like be willing to take young children to all of these foreign cities. They were not afraid to travel with us from a really young age. And I think that made us, I don't know, pretty unique as young people, and even growing up now as we get older, just chill.
And knowing what you know about all the different lifestyles, all the different cultures around the world, and you still choosing to be here, does any part of you feel not guilt, but like you're not getting the most out of life by being in this place you're very familiar with when there's all these other places to explore?
I think almost everyone can relate to this. There's always a sense of all of the different lives you could have led. And that's totally true for me. Like I could have gone down so many different tracks. I could have stayed in Italy when I had a boyfriend there. I could have gone to school abroad because I had a foreign passport and not gone to UNH, and honestly not had the loans from having had school in the US. But yeah, I think there's just like this sense of unlived lives that is ever present, but like you have to realize that you only have one, and making the most of it in a place that you're familiar with, that you have people you love. And that is a really great jumping off point for having an adventurous life, is the next best thing to like living multiple lifetimes in one, which you can't really do, unfortunately.
One of these tracks that you did choose to go down was the art path. And this is something I really want to talk to you about. Can you tell me what drew you to art so early on in your life? What did you get out of it?
I don't know. It feels like walking. Like it feels as essential to my experience as a human in this body to be creative and to use my hands and think creatively about different things and then create something visual. So what drew me? I don't know. It would be like saying like, what drew you to learning how to speak? Like it's just all the same to me. Actually, I want to talk about someone in particular, my cousin Lucy, who's 6 years older than me, and she grew up in Bermuda. She is the epic family talent. Like she's so incredible. Everything she touches turns to gold. And she was inspiring to me from literally day one. So I think Lucy is a huge part of my artistic canon. And yeah, definitely want to give her the credit she's due for that, because she's amazing.
I grew up artistic, more so in the musical sense. So I was in the theater programs and the music programs, and I was surrounded by kids who wanted to go on and study these things, but were constantly being told by teachers, by parents, by coaches, what are you going to do with that? You can't go do anything with that music degree. Be realistic. Did you ever have any naysayers in your come up who were trying to deter you from pursuing this?
I didn't, but I have to say the other aspect to my track was that I knew I wanted to teach. So maybe that's part of it too. Maybe I had the privilege of having a plan where a career path was clear. Like, we need teachers. We need people who can teach kids art and grown-ups art. So yeah, I really did not experience that. But a big part of it probably was also that I had something that people could hold on to as far as the teaching degree that I ended up getting.
So you went to UNH with a concentration in painting, and then you got your master's in teaching. Where did those degrees take you?
So for 2 years, I taught in Raymond at the elementary school. Shout out to Raymond. It was a great place to start out. And then I went to Bakey School in Kingston. I was there for 4 years. The pandemic hit, and I was actually already with one foot out the door before the pandemic. But teaching has just become such a difficult, like the school environment, so emotionally taxing from all sides. And I think if anyone has a loved one in the teaching profession, I think they probably know how hard it is. So I wasn't happy towards the end of my teaching tenure. I don't think that anyone would have known that about me, which is something I really pride myself in. But yeah, I wasn't happy. It wasn't the right environment for me. And I knew that. So I sort of created an exit strategy and followed it out.
On last week's podcast, I spoke to a former teacher who left the industry, and I've talked to many other people on and off air who were teachers and have left it. What is it about teaching that burns people out and makes them run away from it?
I think it's one of the most demanding jobs out there. If you think about the people that you're dealing with, you're taking care of people's children. So that carries a lot of weight and emotion, like within the community and with the parents. And you know how serious it is that you do a good job because these are people. I think that is enough. But then when you think about like the heat in the political climate and how contentious people feel they have to be, or like they feel empowered to not always treat people well because of sort of the atmosphere that we're living in right now. It creates an environment that doesn't have a lot of communication. There's a lot of assumptions that are made about what's happening. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes online that is really ugly and unkind. And there's a lot of emails that go flying. And I just don't think that the norms around communication are where it needs to be to have a positive environment between parents and teachers and admin. And I was always the first one to pick up the phone if there was an issue. And it served me so well. Like, I just thought it was crucial to people understanding kind of where I was at. And honestly, I didn't have much of an issue. Like, I taught art, and as long as kids were happy and having fun with me, no one really minded like what I did. And we did some awesome kind of cultural and travel related art. But it was hard for me to see how other teachers, classroom teachers, were treated. That's really honestly what burned me out. It had nothing to do with the kids.
Lots to chew on there. Let me ask this. Teaching has always been taxing, has always been demanding. And it's not like you have 30 years of experience to fall back on. So maybe you don't know anything else. But do you feel like this particular era, this particular time in history is harder for teachers than in the past?
I do. And I hear that from teachers who have taught for 30 years and they're like on the verge of retirement and they can't, it doesn't make sense for them to leave, but they are struggling. And I think the communication aspect is really hard. I think there's incredibly high, and it's good to have high standards, but like the amount of pressure that teachers are under to do right by every single kid, every single moment, every single day, it's physically impossible. And I think there's just so little sort of understanding of the amount of weight that's on these people's shoulders. And I also just think that kids, my personal opinion is that they're spending a lot of time on screens. And I think that the opportunity costs of like being outside or having a meaningful conversation with someone that helps them develop social skills, I think that that is translating to behaviors in the classroom that, like, it's hard to say. I'm not a parent, so I'm not judging it. It's just this particular moment in time where we have all of this technology and haven't developed sort of strategies for using it in a sustainable way, I think is creating a lot of pressure on the system of people that take care of children day in, day out and manage sort of their development. I think it's such uncharted territory. And I think in order to make it better, we have to sort of admit that to ourselves. And yeah, I think it's just, I mean, the whole world it's a challenging place. And schools are just a microcosm of that. And we're burning out. I think most of my friends who are teachers and who I graduated with and are incredibly talented educators don't do it anymore. And that scares me. Like, it's one thing for me to be like, I don't know, I just need to bow out. But I think it's been harder for me to watch the people I love who are so passionate and so good at what they do leave the profession. I think it's hit me harder, including my husband. My husband was a social studies teacher for high school, and he works at a bank now and is really happy, which honestly breaks my heart a little bit because I watched him teach. We did our internship together. So to see him leave was even more challenging than leaving myself.
You said that when you were leaving the big school districts that you started forming an exit plan to carve out the next phase of your life. What did that exit strategy look like? So right at the beginning of the pandemic, my husband and I actually sold our house. We lived in Sandown, and it was a little bit too far from the Seacoast for me. I didn't realize that at the time, but we lived there for 2 years and we were like ready. We were like, beam us back to Stratham. So we ended up moving back. We moved in with my parents right before the pandemic. And the plan was to turn my dad's shed, we called it the shed, into a tiny house. So those gears were set in motion before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit. We had all this time. We had this huge family project. It was kind of best case scenario to be converting a shed into a tiny house in April 2020. So that's what we did. But I quickly grew out of the basement art studio that I had created. And my dad, you can't stop this man. Like, he's 80 and he's just like, if you have an idea for a project, we are like, you can't say it loud. You can't say it loud, because he will go to Home Depot. He will start getting the supplies. So he ended up building an art studio for me that was actually bigger than our house. So that was my space where I taught, and I taught after school lessons, and I did art camps, and I did that for 4 years in Stratham. So there was a little bit of overlap between teaching in schools and getting that up and running. So once I left at the end of the school year in 2021, I already had students, and a lot of kids were coming to me from the school that I was at for after school lessons and summer camps. So I had sort of a built-in audience, which was really fortunate. And I did that for 4 years. And then we ended up moving to Dover. Why did you want to continue teaching art to kids, but just more so on your own terms?
Well, I did sort of fall into it. I did field enough people who were saying like, okay, but like, are you going to keep teaching? Like, are you going to do after school classes? And I was like, okay, I guess I'm still doing this. But honestly, I loved it. And like the families that would come and drop their kids off. And I formed some really lovely relationships with sort of even the whole family. And that was something I really missed from being the art teacher is I would see kids for 45 minutes a week. I had very limited contact with parents. And I know that they had a great time and that they got a lot from me, but I didn't always get the feedback. Like I did never, once in a while, people would be like, oh, they haven't stopped talking about that blah, blah, blah that you did with them. And I'd be like, wow, like so cool. I had no idea that that had an impact. So I think having kids at my house and having them in smaller groups and then seeing the parents when they picked them up and dropped them off was just sort of more of the community vibe that I was so craving after being in a school and after the pandemic. So yeah, it healed my heart. It healed my teacher heart to teach in that way. And I mean, it's kind of old fashioned. Like that would have been how kids learned in their small communities, in their one-room schoolhouses. And I think there's a reason for that. Like it's delightful to know the families of the kids that you work with and know the kids really well. So it was just the change that I needed. And I don't think I'll go back to a big school after experiencing that.
Well, more change that you needed. You, your husband, Cody, and your dog, Banksy, which tell me you're an artist without telling me you're an artist. That's incredible.
Tell me your husband let you choose the name of your dog without telling me that.
Why'd you guys move to Dover?
Well, the short answer is we got priced out of Stratham, Exeter.
Really? I'm still getting familiar with the area, but isn't Dover in higher demand than those areas?
I mean, they're all really high demand places, but I think the Stratham Exeter community maybe has bigger houses for more money and less that is sort of starter home material. And we ended up buying all we could afford, which was a 200-year-old fixer-upper in a really lovely neighborhood, which they say is a good idea. And it has been so far. We actually bought our house a year ago yesterday.
Wow, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. We've done most of the work ourselves. Major shout out to our dads because they're instrumental as well. My mom was the MVP of removing wallpaper. She just, you couldn't stop her. She was amazing. But it was a good move because Dover is such a great place to live and hang out. And I think growing up in Stratham where there's not as much of a community center. And I really wanted that. And Dover has a great downtown. So we're really happy to be about a mile away from that. And having an old house just really lets me flex my creative muscles. Like you have to be creative because you're just in the thick of it and working and on a budget and you're trying to preserve some aspects of it and you're trying to update others. So I think probably this has been like my most artistically intense year of my entire life working on, we call it the nest.
What are you most proud of in the last year?
I'm most proud of how much in our house is salvaged and upcycled and secondhand, because that's something I'm really passionate about environmentally, but also just like as a personal challenge to myself that to not just do the easy thing and buy something new. And followers of my gram will know that one of our favorite things to do during the pandemic was go to the town dump. Do you know this, Troy?
No.
You haven't done a deep dive. So every Saturday we would go to the town dump and pick. We would pick through people's discarded furniture. Okay. And I would say at least 30% of the furniture in our house is from those years.
Wow.
Yeah, at least. Like I should go through and count because the stuff that people threw away in the town that I grew up in is shocking. From like a brand new Crate and Barrel desk to one time we picked up a KitchenAid mixer, which, you know, people drop like $500 on.
And you can just take this stuff from the dump?
I mean, we did. I don't know.
Are you stealing it?
No,
Is someone there overseeing this?
There's a dump attendant. Yeah.
Okay.
And in other towns, there's a place like a swap shop, like an actual building where people can like place useful items. Stratham doesn't have that, which is a travesty. I think I shudder to think what we've missed over the years that we didn't pick up because it just all goes to landfill and the town pays to cart it away. So I always felt like we were doing the taxpayers a favor by taking their quote trash.
You should run for local office.
At least local dump attendant, right? Because that would be the perfect job really for me. Yeah, I'm a dumpster diver through and through. I'm proud of it.
Wow. That'll be the big takeaway from this episode. Remind me to never come to your house, by the way.
Trust me, you would not guess it. You would never guess from what's around you.
Coming up, how the Seacoast top dumpster diver is rebelling against the modern world. Plus, what we're missing from our lives and what we can do to get it back. Stay with us. This is Seacoast Stories. Hey everyone, it's Troy. Don't skip this. This matters. You're about to hear some very important messages from Amy. She's going to talk about stuff that will leave you thinking, questioning, and wondering how you can live a happier life. I co-sign on everything she's going to say, and I believe everybody on the Seacoast and beyond needs to hear this. To make that happen, I have a favor to ask. I need you to send this episode to someone in your life. The problems Amy will address are not issues confined to the Seacoast. They're issues that anyone in today's world should care about. So if you could, please send an Apple, Spotify, or YouTube link to somebody who needs to hear this episode. It just might change their life. Thank you so much for doing that, for supporting a local podcast, and for being here today. I really appreciate it. Now back to today's story. You've mentioned this word a couple of times, and it's actually been a common theme on this podcast and a word that I've heard so many times in the wake of the pandemic, and I never really heard this word used as often before.
Community?
That one.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and why is it so important to you?
I definitely didn't give it much thought pre-pandemic either. So that doesn't surprise me that that's like a running kind of vein through every conversation that you're having. We had like a very individualistic family. Like we weren't super community based. Like we're off doing our own thing, going all these cool places and being parts of the community there, but like for short periods of time. So I didn't grow up with a really strong sense of community. But I think millennials, we're kind of catching on that it's something we've been missing. So it makes me happy that people are talking about it. And for me, it just means being a part of things, right? And I think it's so crucial to our mental health and the health of our society that we feel beholden to other people and that we feel happy to be around other people and that we feel we can be ourselves with other people. And I think that's kind of what community is, like good times, bad times, like it's all of it. And I think post-pandemic, it became really clear how bad it can get. And then we are all looking for sort of solutions to that emptiness that can result from feeling like an island.
Yeah, I feel like as we've gotten more technologically advanced, we've become so reliant on our technology. And because we're spending so much time with these things, the spaces where community used to be built are slowly going away, or it was just ingrained in our lives. It wasn't something we needed to seek out. Now you kind of have to seek it out. You have to make the effort yourself. You have to put yourself out there. You have to maybe be a little cringe. You have to, like I have, shamelessly go to a Catapult networking event, weasel your way into a conversation between four people and just butt in and say, hey, sorry to interrupt. I'm Troy.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. What's your story?
That's awesome. I mean, if we could
I literally did that when I met you. I literally did that. Cody at True Line was asking me who's on the podcast soon. I'm like, da-da-da-da, Amy. Oh, she's right there.
I was sitting right there. Yeah.
And then I butted into your conversation. It was like, hi.
I think we're so afraid of doing the wrong thing, aren't we? And that is not conducive to feeling a part of things. Like, I think we are doing ourselves such a disservice with the level of perfectionism that we're expecting from ourselves and other people to not be able to make a fool of ourselves or to put ourselves out there in any kind of social way. It's such a shame. Like, you might feel a pang of like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or like, that was kind of weird, but it's so worth it. Like, it's not even a question. Like, making connections with people is what we're literally built to do. And I think we've been under the guise with all this technology that's sprung up around us that that's not necessary.
I want to read you something, and I want you to tell me where this comes from and what it means to you.
Oh.
Okay. Blank is quietly a rebellion against 21st century life. Everything is designed to grab our attention. We are asked to move faster and faster through our lives. I am actively campaigning for people to slow down, to notice, to take time to do something for the enjoyment of it. Pretty radical, I think. End quote.
It kind of makes me tear up hearing that. It's just pulled from my website, but it's true. Like, I feel that so strongly. What was the first word? What was the blank?
Home Remedy Studio.
Oh, okay. All right. My kind of businessy umbrella.
Yes.
I feel that to my core. I think that we're missing something, and a lot of us are trying to get it back. And this podcast probably is your effort to get that back. And I think what I've done with sort of becoming a community art teacher is trying to get that back. And if we all are doing just a little bit more, I think that could lead to really good outcomes for people's mental health and their lives overall.
What are we missing?
Community. I don't know. Community and flexibility and an ability to see gray area and embrace it and be comfortable with your life being imperfect and a work in progress and missing other people. I don't know, missing seeing people that you pass on the street and kind of observing and appreciating your everyday life, and our just the way we're all connected.
How do you in your everyday life rebel against 21st century life?
By the way, do you agree with that statement? Like, does that resonate with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. That makes me happy. My quiet rebellion is probably embodied by my painting practice. So for probably the last 10 years, it started with a professor actually who gave us cigar boxes to hold art supplies. I've carried around a cigar box full of watercolors ever since. And I have it here with me, like sitting on the table. And I can pull it out if I'm just moved by something, or if I observe something that's really beautiful, or if I am with friends and want to remember the moment. I'm known for bringing it on date nights and telling Cody, wait, don't take a sip. Like, I need to paint that gorgeous color beer.
That is so funny. That in itself is a rebellion against 21st century life, because every other woman is, wait, I need to take a photo of that.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, I need to paint
Fuck that. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, I didn't make that connection that I'm basically doing the same thing. But the best part about what I'm doing is like, I'm doing it for me. Like, if I end up posting what I'm painting, it's because I want to inspire other people. It's later. First of all, I don't have Instagram on my phone. I want to inspire other people to pull out paints when they're out and about. Not because I want to show everyone the beautiful cocktail that my husband ordered for this like gorgeous anniversary dinner that we're having. Like, I'm not I just want to live in the moment. I think that's where the joy is. That's where the happiness is and where the really meat of life is found. So I didn't think I would be doing it, like encouraging anyone to walk around with a cigar box. But that's exactly what I do, because I started fielding a lot of requests for supply lists. And then my friend who manages a local brewery in town wanted me to teach there. And so it sort of all collided. And now I make these kits for people to go around and do what I do with a cigar box full of art supplies. And it's called Paint Everywhere.
And you've given me my very own cigar box, which I'm going to proudly carry with me. I'm going to create the most mediocre art that I will not be posting anywhere because no one needs to see that.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Oh, boy.
You've unleashed the art teacher in me, which is like, that's not the point, right? Like the point is like the fact that you're sitting down and staring at something and being like, oh, that leaf has a different color on the edge of it, and the veins are lighter than the rest of the leaf. Like, that's the point. And if you mix the colors wrong and it comes out differently on your paper than you had it in your mind, like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, that is not at all what it's about. And of course, like, you also get better because for some reason, I don't know why, art is like the one thing that people expect to be good at right away. Why? Nothing else in the world is like we're watching the Olympics right now. We don't think that those people got up there and were like first timers. So don't be hard on yourself. Keep going. What were you going to say? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I don't remember. All I'm saying is that I'm very proud to carry this box around and not be my perfectionist self.
Yay. Yes.
You host at breweries like Loaded Question, at North Country Cider, and also at Treeline. You've done some events as well. Events where you're not just teaching children anymore, you're teaching adults. It's a date night for people. It's a place for people to gather to get out of their heads. Any experience level is welcome, and come paint for 2 hours and maybe have some good beer and or cider during it. Why is this something that you're doing?
I noticed that this was a gap in people's experience when I was teaching in schools, and I would present the project and then the teacher maybe was still in the doorway and she'd say, oh, I wish I could stay for this. Like, I really want to do this. And I had such a sense of like, oh, I really wish you could. But they, of course, had to go back to their classroom and plan for the rest of the day and week and whatever. But yeah, it's just been so clear to me from pretty early on that not everyone had a childhood that was so full of art and so free in that way. And people feel really stuck. Like sometimes people come to these workshops and they're like, I'm just not good at art. And sometimes I ask, why? Why do you feel that way? And they'll say, it's because a classmate of theirs in elementary school was like better than them. And you can let go of that. Like, you're 32 or whatever. And I love empowering people to reflect on what is holding them back and then giving them literally the tools to move forward in a more free thinking, free spirited kind of way. And I think that is such an epidemic in our culture, is that perfectionism. And anything I can do to get people to reflect on that and realize like it doesn't need to be that way. And you deserve enjoyment from a hobby that you don't have to show to anyone. Like, doesn't need to go everywhere. But I think people think that it does too. Like, I think people think if I'm doing it, I have to show people, like I have to put it on Instagram or I have to talk about it. And it can just be for you. Like, I'm happy to throw together an art show one day of all the very first paintings that everyone does at my workshops, because I think that is worth celebrating. But you don't need to show anyone too. It can just be for you.
And when you say that, how does that land for people? How do you convince them that you don't have to get this perfect?
In general, I think it goes over well. if it doesn't, if people are still really up in their heads, or if they've had a really tough day and they just can't sort of pull themselves out of that vibe, I tell them they're welcome to just paint stripes. Like, why does your painting need to look like the thing in front of you? It can also just be you mixing colors that look pretty and dragging your brush down the paper over and over again. Like, that might unlock something, like baby steps. You could just do that and then feel, okay, I'm ready to paint the bouquet of flowers after that. So I think working with kids does serve me well when working with adults, because we're just big kids. Like, we're all just dealing with the same stuff forever, aren't we? So being able to sort of give people their sort of bite size, what they can do next to feel a little bit better about going outside their comfort zone, I think is a strength, and it works out well in that environment.
You described something a couple moments ago, looking at a leaf and noticing how this leaf is different. If you polled the next 100 people that you see and asked them when was the last time you looked at the intricacies of a leaf, I'm assuming 98 of them would not be able to tell you the last time they did that.
No.
Something like that involves intentionally slowing down, an intense level of focus, and of not doing anything else, but just looking at this leaf, which many people would say, that's not productive. That's pointless. I've got things to do. I'm short on time. X, Y, and Z excuses. How do you slow down to appreciate those little things that we take so much for granted?
It's really a mindfulness practice. It's a meditation. And I think at least we have the language now to be able to describe it that way to people. People are like, oh yeah, they're a bit more open to when you use that language to experimenting. And it really serves your everyday life well to sharpen those skills of observation. Like, I can't think of a single career or like job where it wouldn't benefit you to notice details and be able to hone in on something. And I remember in college, I can't remember who it was, but one of my professors was talking about how they actually, Boston medical schools will bring students to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and docents will go around and they'll teach them how to look at a piece of art and analyze the different parts of it and the colors and the lines and the composition. And all of that is transferable to being able to effectively diagnose a patient. And it's so applicable and it's fun. Like, it's not a chore. And I do meditate, but this is my primary mode of meditation. And that's what I hear from a lot of people is that, oh my gosh, like, I haven't thought about anything the whole time I've been doing this. And I'm like, perfect. Like, you don't have to be thinking all the time. It's really actually good if you don't. And if you can sort of hone those neural connections, you're a lot better off, I think, in your mental health and your happiness.
I want to ask you this, kind of thinking big picture. I grew up, like I told you, in in the arts, if you will. I went to an amazing high school in upstate New York, top-ranked music program, top-ranked musical theater program. It was always high priority at my school, but around the country, in states or in areas that are less fortunate, the arts programs, the art, the music, the dance, whatever, are often the first things to go when times get tough, which is unfortunate. You obviously love the arts, so you're biased. I love them as well. Why is it such a necessary part of a child's education?
I think because it's so integral to play and experimentation, and that is so integral to child development. We're lucky to live in a time where people are starting to realize, like, this isn't just for fun. Like, this isn't just frou-frou kind of like soft, really soft skills. This is helping your brain work better in other areas of your life. And I mean, you can feel it, can't you? Like, imagine your life if you didn't walk into a place and experience beauty, or you couldn't look out onto a landscape and marvel at something. I think it's like that sense of awe that we get from experiencing beauty, or the importance of using your hands. I think using your hands in any sort of way of creating something is so good for your brain. Like, your brain craves it. Like, if you're not using your hands, your brain thinks that there's something wrong. So I think it's a no-brainer for kids. Like, art is life at that age, and they're experiencing everything through play, and that's how they're learning. And art is just such a great vehicle for developing so many skills. And it's not just kids who need it. Everyone needs it. And I think I realize that more and more, that kids are getting a lot more of it than adults are, but everyone needs it.
Amy, I could keep talking to you for hours. I've loved this conversation. I won't keep you forever. You've got trees to go stare at. So I will.
I do. I totally do.
I will end with the closing tradition we have on this podcast. We ask the same final question to every person every week on the podcast, and I will ask it to you. Amy, what is your mission that you're on right now?
So, knowing that this question was coming, I did give it some thought. I think my mission is to embrace imperfection. And if I help other people be better at that, that's great. That's really good too. But I think we live in such a perfectionistic, demanding, and kind of culture of optimization that I think we miss out on the little moments that make life good. And I think we can get really bogged down by things not being perfect. And I have kind of been on this mission since I think I'm a perfectionist by nature. Like, I think deep down, that's probably where this rebellion comes from. But when I was in 4th grade, I got an A- on a math test. And I was a mess. I was also very competitive back then, and my husband will say still now, but I got an A-, and my 4th grade teacher, Mr. Gagnon, brought me out into the hallway because it was like distracting how I was crying. So he brought me out, and we were sitting against the wall. I remember he was so tall. So the fact that he was like sitting on the floor with me, his knees are like up to my forehead. And we were sitting against the wall in the hallway, and he is hearing me cry, just sob. And I remember he laughed, which was kind of funny. Like, at the time I was like, yeah, fair. Like, that's a crazy noise. And he said to me, Amy, you're in 4th grade. Life is going to get harder. You just can't react like this to something so small. And I think that moment set me on the course that I've been on ever since, which is the feeling that there's big things in life and there's small things in life, and you cannot get too bogged down with the small things. And you can have ways of dealing with the big things that are healthy, and that you don't just say, like, why me all the time? Because life is just such a crapshoot. And if we can have a little bit more grace with the things that we experience and that we do, and then also for other people, I think the world could be a much better place. So yeah, just embracing the gray areas of life and embracing imperfection and helping other people to do that too is probably my mission.
What an amazing mission, Amy. I fully support you on that. And I thank you for joining me on the show. And I would also like to congratulate you because Amy just accepted a teaching job in Newcastle. Despite her problems with the school system that she talked about, Newcastle made her an offer she couldn't refuse, and it's only for 1 day per week at a small school, so it should be way more up her alley and to her liking. And don't worry, everyone, Amy will still be the Seacoast community art teacher for the foreseeable future. Now, before Amy left my home studio for the day, I just had to ask her one final question. I'm a huge art lover. I studied it a lot in high school, and whenever I travel, the art museum is the first place I go. I love spending a couple hours browsing, trying to understand what's happening in the paintings, all while appreciating the unthinkable time, effort, and skill put into these masterpieces hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So, while I had a fellow art lover with me, I just had to take a moment to nerd out with her. And this is what we talked about.
I was just at the MFA and the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and I always beeline for the Impressionist room. And it's cliche, but like, okay, Troy's like fist bumping to that, everyone, just so you know. He agrees. I just love the softness of them, the brushstrokes, the immediacy, it's just beautiful. And especially when you get up close, I think they're best appreciated off the screen, like in person. You can really, they're so touchable, but not because it's a museum. There's a reason that people love them, and it's because your eye has to do some of the work. I think that makes them really pleasing to the eye, that it's not just like laid out for you on a silver platter. Like your brain has to put some of the pieces together. And I think that makes them delightful to look at. I don't know. The Impressionists, I love everything. That's the honest to God truth. I really do love all art.
Really?
I do.
Even some Caravaggio, Counter-Reformation, 1400s, Judith slaying Holofernes. You like that?
I do, because everything has a place in art history. Like, is that what you're into? Do you like those sort of?
I love art history because so I was a U.S. history major.
Yeah.
And I kind of studied earlier on. I later switched from this, but for a while I kind of studied art and music as a reflection of what was going on in the world at that time.
Well, it's the most honest. Yeah. It's the most honest history that exists, is like people creating these songs and paintings that had to do with their lived experience. Is like, it's honest.
I have always most closely identified, for better or for worse, with Vincent van Gogh. Mm-hmm. Starry Night. I mean, I know it's the hit single, it's the cliche, but I love
There's a reason for
that
it, though.
Painting so much. And the fact that he painted that while he was in the asylum, and that was his view of the night sky, how he perceived it from his room. As he descended into madness, I've often felt like I'm descending into madness, and I've created some weird art or said some things I regret. And so kind of the writing I've done in the past, I've kind of felt like it was in my Van Gogh era. So.
Ooh, I love that little insight into you, Troy. Yeah. I think, well, we all can relate to that, right? Like, we all pretend that we don't have a Vincent van Gogh side, and yet we all love his work. So it's like, we definitely all have that side of us, for sure.
We do all have a Van Gogh side in us, let's be honest. Even Amy, who I thank so much for joining me today and for sharing her story and for being the amazing person that she is. I actually attended her workshop on Saturday at North Country Cider, and I won't tell you what I painted because I'm keeping it for me, but I promise it was nowhere near as good as my Scooby and Shaggy. If you'd like to join a future workshop, just visit homeremedystudio.com for more information, the link to which is in today's show notes. I've got a friend coming to town this week, so if you've got any ideas for what we should do together, just slide into my DMs. And if you happen to see me around the Seacoast, perhaps at Loaded Question, Treeline, or on a walk in the park, please come up and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until next time, everybody, live free or die.